So the first session is going to be all about internet as a platform for economic growth. And when we were coming up with the themes for this conference, this was a topic that from the local stakeholders' point of view seemed to be a very important one. So I'm hoping that today we will have a fruitful discussion on this and that we'll explore ways in which the internet can be used to boost economic growth in Kyrgyzstan. And we have, as Frederic already said, a very high-level expert panel here today. And what I would like to propose is that we do a very quick, brief introductory round for everybody to just introduce themselves and to say a few words about your background. And then we will kick off with the presentations. So we have just perhaps to say we have experts from the economic background, with business background, education background, innovation background, and also I'm expecting some discussion how the government and e-government can play a role in boosting economic growth in Kyrgyzstan. So please, Aziz, would you like to start with the introductions?
Азис Абакиров, Кыргызская ассоциация разработчиков программного обеспечения услуг, предприниматель в области разработки программного обеспечения.
Hi, I'm Andrew Wachtel. I'm the president of the American University of Central Asia, which obviously has to do with the education sphere.
Good morning. My name is Siddhartha Raja. I'm a policy specialist with the Information and Communication Technologies team at the World Bank. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Саламатсыздарбы, good morning, доброе утро. Аскар Kutanov, академик Национальной академии наук, и я являюсь региональным координатором проекта Европейской комиссии Центральноазиатская исследовательская и образовательная сеть. Спасибо.
Добрый день, Musaev Maksat, компания Google, специалист по среднему малому бизнесу.
Me client support. Juan Mamytov, representative of civil society, public foundation, electronic future.
Thank you very much.
Спасибо вам большое.
So hopefully Siddhartha will give us a kind of overview of what's going on with the internet here, what is the World Bank doing, and also how the World Bank, perhaps you have some evidence on how the economic growth can be boosted by the internet. Thank you.
Once again, good morning, and it's a pleasure to be back in Bishkek. A little colder than I'm used to, but it's always nice to be with the warm friends, and thanks again for all the hospitality. I would like to talk about what the possible economic impact from an increasing use of the internet can be in the Kyrgyz Republic. Next slide, please. Oh, I can use my... All right, so I just want to have a very brief presentation, and we can obviously have a much wider discussion after the presentations are done. But to talk a little bit about the status of the internet, something of course a lot of you are familiar with, what the internet can do to support Kyrgyzstan's economic growth. And I want to focus on 4 aspects, because we obviously have top-line figures. There's research by the World Bank that shows that a 10% percentage point increase in penetration of broadband services, 10 percentage point increase in broadband services translates to approximately 1.38% increase in GDP growth. So it has a very, very positive impact in the many studies, of course, but I want to break down into the 4 aspects which I know are very important for this country, which are jobs, trade, innovation, and services. I then want to talk a little bit about what Kyrgyzstan can do to unlock this growth, and focusing on policies, reforms, and institutions, as well as some of the programs that could be done on the demand and the supply side. I don't want to necessarily bore you with the numbers, but I think you can see the red is Kyrgyzstan. You could see where Kyrgyzstan falls approximately. These numbers can be debated. It's from one of the sources which is available to us. Obviously there are other sources, but I think the message is that Kyrgyzstan still has a way to go, but that if you look at other developing countries around the world, that there is huge potential. So whether it is on the penetration of broadband services, services where it's easy for Kyrgyzstan in the next few years to maybe catch up to a country like Mongolia or Georgia, maybe even overtake them, or in terms of international connectivity to increase the number of connections and increase how much that connectivity is available in the country. All of these have great scope for improvement. So in order to think about what that improvement can do for the country, which is really where I'd like to focus, I actually look quite deeply into the national development strategy that the government has put together. And it's very clear that there is a great level of interest. And obviously my conversations with the private sector, with academia in the country show that there is a great level of interest. I've just highlighted this one piece, which is that full-scale access to internet, the way the government sees it, is going to help in human capacity development, economic growth, culture, education, healthcare, and individual growth. So really unlocking that opportunity. And then obviously rural connectivity is one of the things, and the Vice Prime Minister mentioned this as well in her comments, as well as using internet access for things like the modern system of e-government, which of course the public sector has been working on. So all of these are in a way the ambitions that the government has, and I think the people's ambitions also reflect this, business ambitions also reflect this. So what can the internet do? And here is where I'd like to spend a little time today. As I said, there are 4 topics which should be thought about when we think about what the internet can do. In very practical terms, I think one of the most important thing is thinking about jobs and employment. And I don't think I need to convince this audience that the ICT sector, the information and communication technology sector, has now become integral to almost every single economic and social activity, whether it's banking, it's tourism, logistics, anything has an intersection with the internet and with ICT. There's a very nice quotation I like to use from the person who heads the Austrian public apprenticeship system. This is an employment service in Austria. He has a quotation where he says that 20 years ago, the only thing a warehouse manager needed to know was how to lift a heavy box. Today, the person needs to know inventory management, he needs to know software, he needs to know HR. That's what's going to empower this person. So it's not just physical strength, also it's a lot of that knowledge strength. And so thinking about even something like a warehouse manager's job being impacted by ICT, by the internet, by technology, we know for a fact that pretty much every sector today is going to have similar outcomes. So thinking of how ICT can play a role in both being a skill for a person looking for a job, working to keep themselves relevant, but then also looking at it as a way to connect more people to work, which means either improving the quality of the public employment services, providing more information, so whether it's websites like the jobs websites or job searching websites, but also through opportunities like online work, where a person with a globally relevant skill, like say programming or accounting skills or even copy editing or translation, can go online to one of many websites and find work and do work online and be paid for that work. So it's not, you're no longer now restricted in geographic terms to a labor market that is just in Kyrgyzstan or in the neighboring countries. You can just literally work for anyone, anywhere. And that's the kind of transformation that the internet can unlock. And we have some analysis that shows, and this is actually from 2013, so the numbers have obviously increased, that over 15 million people around the world are working on such kinds of platforms and are exploiting those kinds of opportunities. But this also creates a challenge, and it's a very simple arithmetic, which is that the kids who have started school this year are going to start working in 2030, right? So they're just 5 years now, about the time they're 20, 25 years old. It'll be 2030. We didn't have the iPhone 7 years ago, 7.5 years ago to be precise. What will the next 15 to 20 years bring when it comes to technology? And how is our world going to change? If these kids are not ready for that future, they are going to be irrelevant. There is no exception to this. So we need to make sure that the Kyrgyz school children and young people, and of course also the older workers who risk losing their jobs because of the fact that they don't have these kinds of digital skills. All of these different segments of the population are digitally literate, have ICT skills. That's going to be a very important piece to focus on. Let's talk about trade, which is another big factor here. And I know that the country is looking at itself being some kind of a logistics hub, being some kind of a transit hub. There is potential, and obviously ICT plays a big role in this, both in terms of trade in services. Excuse me. I don't need to convince this audience about that. Trade in services, knowledge services, IT, outsourcing, those all could be opportunities. But the impact that ICT is having on trade in goods is also quite significant. So there's a lot of knowledge-enabled goods like pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, electronics, things that need knowledge to go along with them, which can be also exported from here. And so it's important to also have in place the kind of infrastructure that can support that you can have technical support, you can have people who are empowered to engage with other markets. So that kind of trade is and the McKinsey Global Institute has a very interesting study from earlier this year, where they talk about the fact that those kinds of knowledge-intensive goods, as opposed to labor-intensive or commodity-intensive goods, they are actually trading, it's growing about 1.3 times faster than labor-intensive goods. So the other way to look at it is that this very interesting statistic which shows that commercial SMEs on eBay are 90% exporters compared to 25% of traditional SMEs. So an internet-enabled SME has a greater potential to internationalize, to engage with other markets. So that's another big opportunity, again requiring very good internet, very reliable internet access. Services, obviously improving e-government, government to business services, government to citizen services, ensuring that the government is accountable, responsible and transparent in its dealings with its stakeholders is also something technology will enable. And finally, innovation, which is where the internet and the ICT, whether it's cloud computing or analytics, all of these play a role in enabling innovation. Obviously, ICT is not the sufficient condition for innovation. There's, again, skills are important, financing is important, but ICT as an underlying infrastructure is pretty much a requirement. It's a necessity for any kind of solid innovation activity going into the future. So now I want to turn to how Kyrgyzstan can actually look at developing its internet capacity. There's two aspects to it. One is what we call the supply side, where we are looking at a wider access to the internet. And then is the demand side, which is a greater use of the internet. So it's not enough anymore to just build the network out. People need to understand that this network, that these services are useful to them. And I think actually Kyrgyzstan is in a relatively good position here, but we can of course do more. And then there are some challenges to overcome. It goes back to some of the conversations we had earlier today. So I'd like to just talk about this a bit, where obviously one of the big areas, and as the World Bank, our main counterpart is the public sector, it's the government. And our colleagues at the International Finance Corporation work primarily with the private sector. So a little bit of this is a bit more public sector oriented, and I'll flag that as well, which is that if the public sector and the government needs to get involved, the best place for it to invest in terms of connectivity is in the hard to reach areas of the country where people don't create, the business case is not in place for the private sector to go in on its own. Obviously, building international connectivity requires some level of collaboration with the government because of the international aspects to it. And domestic connectivity, again, because of the fact that I know that this has improved quite a bit in the last few months, in fact. But for example, the north-south connectivity in this country is something that has to be improved even further, connecting to the rural areas or mountainous parts of the country. These are places where it's difficult, the commercial case may not be as viable, and so for the public sector to come in makes a lot of sense. It also makes a lot of sense for them to come in on cutting the cost of broadband rollout. So when it comes to building, say for example, a fiber optic network, how can we reduce the biggest cost of building a fiber optic network, which is the civil works? It's not actually the fiber, it's not the electronics. Between 50 and 90% of a fiber optic network, the cost is civil works. It's digging up a road, it's putting a duct in, and it's trenching, and it's putting the fiber in there. So, for example, coordinating the development of a road with the development of the fiber infrastructure could be a way forward. Whereas on wireless, maybe a very smart spectrum strategy can also help. And obviously letting the competitive private sector lead the way. And obviously, to move towards greater use of the internet, affordability is one of those big concerns. And I've done a quick analysis where a rough guess is that about 25% of the monthly expenditure of a person in Kyrgyzstan would have to be spent on a 1 Mbps broadband connection today. 25%. That's how much it costs. It's unaffordable. And if you go to the poorest part of the country, the bottom 20% of the country, the population, it becomes 42%. It would cost someone 42% of their monthly income to have an internet, a 1 Mbps internet connection. Now, even if these numbers have reduced, they still will remain high. You just halve it and it's 20%. The standard we're looking for is 2% or 3%. So there's huge scope for improvements in affordability. And trying to do that would be one of the big, I think, game changers for the country. Driving demand, we looked at the fact that content is not necessarily a huge issue, but it's still something where the poorest having access to good services, having access to economic opportunities can make a difference. And therefore, and I'm very happy we have a university here because they are one of those big users that can attract more business to invest into the internet. So universities, banks, tourism, hospitals, etc., big users there. In terms of challenges, obviously the terrain and geography specifically would raise some challenges. It's not a deal breaker. There are other countries like Moldova, for example, or Armenia, which are also landlocked, which have difficult political relationships with their neighbors at times, but have managed to improve their internet connectivity significantly. So having that political geography or terrain may not necessarily be a deal breaker. And obviously we need to look at the poorer parts of the country. And again, I think going back to skills development would be important. My last slide is to go a little bit deeper here and talk a little bit about some ideas that we could discuss about what needs to be done specifically. And I'm not going to go into full detail here, but obviously improving international and domestic backbone connectivity through a competitive market, through private investment would be very important. The big opportunity I want to talk about here is the fact that being landlocked can actually become an advantage. Your position can become an advantage. We heard today that the connectivity with China, for example, is not yet fully active. I mean, there is some connectivity, it can improve. Connecting south via Tajikistan into Afghanistan into Pakistan is a big opportunity. CASA 1000 opens that up. There are obviously other methods to do this, but Kyrgyzstan can actually become a hub. It could become a facilitator of connecting the South Asian countries to East Asia and to Central Asia. So I think that's an opportunity which would make Kyrgyzstan a more attractive market to invest in as well. So certainly something that we are looking at very seriously. Creating a competitive regulatory environment where you have high quality services, and this is an important point, where it's not just enough to have cheap services, but it have to be good services. Because if you have a business connected to the internet that is relying on it for payments and for customers, they cannot afford to have anything less than 99.9% connectivity. They can't afford 50% connectivity. You can't have internet off on Tuesdays and Thursdays and run a business. So I think that that's another important piece we need to think about. management of radio spectrum, especially with the move towards digital television, opening up new opportunities there. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, defining a new role for the public sector, where the institutions that are governing the sector can collaborate more with the private sector, with each other. Infrastructure, we have Kyrgyz Telecom, which can play a very important role here, but also the sharing of infrastructure with the railways, with the gas pipelines, with electricity. I think using whatever fiber and rights of way exist, I think would be very important. And obviously the government as a service driver, promoting local content development. And extremely important is ensuring that those complementary policies are in place, that payment systems, for example, are working, e-money can function smoothly, that skills are developed in the economy. So it's not something which just needs a focus on infrastructure, because the infrastructure will appear if the private sector is given the opportunity, if there is some support for those commercially less viable areas. But having those complementary policies in place, creating the ecosystem, is truly what will unlock economic growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Siddhartha. Very interesting insights, and I hope that we have some time in the end of the session to discuss this in more detail and also take questions from the audience to see into the concrete examples you might be able to provide. Next, I would like to invite Andrew Wachtel from the American University in Central Asia. Please.
Thank you very much. Fortunately for you, I have no slides, so you don't have to look at the screen. You can just listen. So when we talk about universities and internet, there tends to be very hyperbolic conversation on two different ends. On the one side, you have a group of people who say the internet changes everything, and on the other side, you have people who say the internet changes nothing at universities. And the reason those two opinions exist is because universities historically have had two very different functions. One in the area of information transfer, and the other in the area of what to do with that information that is transferred. And if we look at number one, the internet indeed changes everything. And if we look at number two, perhaps the internet doesn't change very much. So the first thing that clearly has changed is the concept of a university as its own universe. The word university obviously has within it universe, and most universities did think of themselves as their own universe. They, of course, were connected to other universities and to the world, even in the bad old days before the internet. But they didn't think about that very often. Their policies generally were developed internally. This is especially true in the United States, where there's no Ministry of Education to tell them what to do. But even in European countries, universities operated with relative autonomy, even within state education systems. And they didn't think too much about borrowing content from other people. True, they bought books in the library and they didn't write all their books, so they always had some connection with other people. But still, their faculty members taught their courses the way they wanted to. They did things the way they wanted to do them. They asked of their students what they wanted to ask of them, and they didn't compare themselves very often and didn't have a very good way to compare themselves very often with other universities. So they existed not like the network that we showed earlier today where everything was connected to each other. They existed more like what we think of as solar systems in the galaxy, where each one is a kind of self-contained system, though of course they're part of some larger thing. In the current environment, this is no longer possible to do. We now know that there are other ways to deliver the content that we deliver, and the big universities in the world, the most ambitious universities in the world, are moving very quickly to try to monopolize content provision for the world. So if you look at a project like Coursera, for example, what you see is, on the one hand, at least in principle, a very positive idea that these courses will be available to everyone in the world. What you also see, though, is the possibility that their availability will completely destroy the possibility that smaller universities have to provide their own content anymore, because the question will inevitably arise: if I can take microeconomics from Stanford's best professor, why should I take microeconomics from the professor at AUCA? And then the second question, and why should I study at AUCA at all if I can simply go on to Coursera and learn the things I need to learn? Well, I mean, the answer to the question pretty obviously is education is not just about information transfer. Education is primarily about what you can do with the material that you have had transferred to you. But that's going to require universities to think completely differently about what we do. So what the internet provides is a huge opportunity and also an enormous challenge for universities to rethink the model of what they provide. And it looks, at least on the surface, it should be relatively easy. So I can easily sit in my office and say, okay, look, we do a certain amount of things where we tell people stuff, and we do a certain amount of things where we make them do things with the stuff that we tell them. But it turns out to be very difficult to unbundle those two things. So when I actually try to teach, and we use all sorts of very high-tech internet fora for teaching now, so I taught this semester a class, and I provided most of the material for my students in the form of in advance slides that they could look at. But when you got to the classroom, it's impossible to not talk about the stuff while you're simultaneously talking about the things that you need them to do with the stuff. So it's very difficult to tell your faculty, okay, here's what I want you to do. Here, all the things that are information transfer, you turn over to the web and let them, the students get them from somewhere else. And all the things that are creative and that you make them think and you make them work with the material, you do. It turns out to be very, very difficult in practice to do that. But as more and more content is available on the internet, it becomes harder and harder to say, well, just ignore it. You can't ignore it. Your students won't let you ignore it, and it doesn't work to ignore it. So you have to learn how to completely change what your faculty members do, and then you have to think about who your students are going to be and what kinds of students you're going to have. So it was said earlier, you know, the country needs to develop more people who have the skills to use the kinds of technologies that are out there. And that's undoubtedly true. Is that a job for universities? Well, it's not entirely clear that's a job for universities. I mean, in an ideal world, that's a job for people when they're 7 years old in their houses or in their third grade classes to learn. By the time they get to universities, it's a little bit late to teach them the sort of basic things they have to know to be the warehouse manager who now needs to be able to use the internet, because probably not every warehouse manager is going to go to a university, but every warehouse manager has to know how to use the internet. So to say that's a job for universities is probably not the best way to understand it. So the job for universities apparently is to teach the teachers, to teach the people who are going to go out there and work with those people. So for example, we just started a program with the help of the CUNA Foundation in Zurich. That's a logistics certificate program for undergraduate students. So it is precisely the, well, slightly higher level than warehouse managers, but yes, it's teaching people supply chain management and logistics. And what we said is, okay, simultaneously what the university will do is we will offer a bunch of short courses in Kyrgyz for people who don't need to become specialists in supply chain management and logistics, but they do need to learn the basics of how to use the internet and other enabling technologies so that they can get their goods to market from wherever they are. And I think that's where, if you say what can universities do for economic growth for the countries they're in, that's the kind of thing that we can do. So we shouldn't think of ourselves, and we can't think of ourselves anymore, as exclusively providers of 4 years of undergraduate education or 2 years of master's education or 3 years of PhD education to a very small slice of the population. We will continue to do that. as long as that's economically viable, and it's not clear how long that's going to be economically viable, but we will continue to do that because it is our mission ultimately to prepare leaders for society. But simultaneously, we need to recognize that there's a very large sector of the population in a country like Kyrgyzstan that has not had the kind of education they need, even though they've gone through the school system and probably even though they've graduated from other universities. And we need to figure out how to provide those people with a very different kind of education, a much more focused, short course education. And we need to create the demand for that because they don't know that they need it. So we need, first of all, to explain to people why they need it, and then we need to be able to provide it in a very, very efficient way so that you could take our 2-day logistics bare bones course in Kyrgyz, and suddenly your productivity as a farmer or as a small exporter would grow exponentially. But we need to do that in an extremely focused and an extremely well-organized manner so that people see the value of those courses. And once we start doing that, then the question is, how many other areas can we expand into, and how do you understand opening up the university so you don't change its core mission entirely, but you have to massively expand its peripheral mission. And ultimately, in the long run, you have to figure out how to use that peripheral mission to support the core mission, because the core mission can't support itself anymore. There's too much competition. One other thing I didn't mention is the extent to which foreign universities and foreign partners now suck up all the best talent from the country and pull it out of the country. So again, most of your best students are being lost to other places. Some may come back. But so the university has to completely change, especially in a country like Kyrgyzstan, its focus, and think about how to combine education at a high level with this kind of everyday, very short, very efficient, very technology-focused education, primarily offered to people who already have an education in principle, but realize that the education they've had is not sufficient for the world they live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Very interesting. And again, hope to get some further insights from you in the end. Next, we have Askar Kutanov from the CAREN network project, who's going to discuss a bit more from the research and education point of view.
Thank you, Marit, for introduction. My slides in English, so I could talk in Russian. But first of all, I would like to say about slogan of Central Asia Research and Education Network. So it's our slogan: from Asian trade route to higher speed data highway. И я перехожу на русский язык.
Russian speaker in most part, and I think that the topic of my presentation is innovative internet for research and education. First, I would want to recall my famous Japanese saying: a frog in the well doesn't know that there is a sea somewhere. If we do not have access to the internet, we will be like frogs in a well. I think this is a good comparison. Please, next slide. Here you can see briefly the outline of my presentation. First, I would like to talk about the role of the National Research and Education Network and RANs. And secondly, I will talk about Central Asian Research and Education Network, CAREN. And third point is network availability, its parameters, how it works. And number 4 is development of application of networks. And then I will provide you some case studies, and probably you have already seen when you were registered. Number 6 is to talk about the current conference that we start organizing on an annual basis, and this year it was held in Almaty. Next slide, please. In the previous session, Talant Sultanov has highlighted that we need to create the knowledge society. I think this scheme illustrates well that ICT can be can have a role of the trigger of development through education, through innovation and development. And through these steps we can reach knowledge society. And since Kyrgyzstan is a small country, we can reach this goal if we actively move forward along this way. Now I would like to talk about the National Research and Education Network and NRENs. In European countries, they realized that establishing non-profit research education networks which unify the universities, the research centers, institutes, libraries and hospitals. Through these, we are establishing a mechanism to promote innovation and development, and we bring together into one network. And the most important role of NRENs in this is collaboration. If the commercial provider just provides services and gets money, and that's it. That's his function, end of his function. But in our case, in NRENs is a partnership and cooperation. Each NREN provides training and builds capacity of ICT specialists, and it supports development of applications and holds annual conferences. This is the mechanism of development. This is not just providing a single service and get money. And European model of NREN, it tells that each country should have one NREN for the whole country. At the international level, it is the cooperation among and between NRENs. And here, for the Europe, this model is the following, that each country of Europe is financing NRENs, and at the European level, the European Commission supports the GIANT system, which unifies different NRENs from different countries. International research and education networks, they facilitating economic growth and prosperity, and most European NRENs, they follow the hybrid model of financing. So that means the users make contribution, reasonable contribution to the cost of production of services, while the government ensures more long-term financing of innovation and improvements. I will talk about the Kyrgyz NREN. It unifies 27 universities, national, Kyrgyz Turkish Manas University, Slovenic University, etc., scientific research institutes. This is the Academy of Science, etc. And we have about 40, not 35, but 40 high schools which are connected to our network, libraries. We have several health facilities, including the cardiology center. More than 100,000 users of Kyrgyz NREN. As for the use curve, so we have only 1 megabit per second, and we reached 7. And by 2014 we have 622 megabits per second. This is a channel which provides services to the research and education network, the universities. We see the increase of use and demand in bandwidth, internet and applications. Now I'd like to tell about CAREN. This is the project of European Commission. It has started since 2009, and since 2010 we have in fact connected different NRENs, and now we have 4 countries out of 5 Central Asian countries, and each country has its own national research and education network. In Kazakhstan it is CAREN, Kyrgyzstan CAREN, TAREN in Tajikistan, TUREN in Turkmenistan. This is the abbreviation from the English letters. CAREN provides services to 1 million users, and it has a direct connection to GIANT, STAIN, and you will see those. Next slide, please. This is a global connectivity Thanks to CAREN, we have integrated with the global research community, and now we have the opportunity to communicate with the whole world and with research academicians from different parts of the world. This is the topology. We had the presentation on connectivity, and I would like to say that we have direct channel from Bishkek to Frankfurt, Almaty, Frankfurt, Ashgabat, Frankfurt, and Tajikistan is connected to Hong Kong. The Trans-Siberian channel goes to Frankfurt. And we have 2 points of presence in Frankfurt and Hong Kong. The network is working effectively, and there is a stable operation. This is the regional. We cannot say purely regional because we do not have direct connection. We have connection between Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan through Frankfurt. This demonstrates that the Central Asian market has not developed to full. This is the result of tender when we consider price and quality, and we hope that in our next tender, in our next meeting, next stage, we will have the regional connection between our countries. And the representative of Kyrgyz Telecom already mentioned that they have direct connection between Dushanbe and Bishkek. And we hope that our next stage will also have direct connection between Dushanbe and Bishkek. This I have already mentioned in my presentation. CAREN is a kind of bridge between Europe and Asia, and we have connection both to Asia and to Europe. Now, about the technical indicators on accessibility, we hold monitoring. You can see that about 99% and more. There are some breakages and outages, but in most cases the accessibility makes more than 99%, and the average indicators are very good. And traffic transfer between the CAREN to Frankfurt, so there is high volume of data exchange. We are mostly using the data rather than transmitting. The black line demonstrates the volume of traffic. Here we have the operation center, which serves 4 countries: Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and we have the center based in Bishkek, in the National IT Center. It provides server for 4 countries and ensures good work of the network, effective work of the network. As for the applications, I will tell why we're using this network. Since this is the research and education network, we should know the goals and objectives. So for this network, first, monitoring of environment. So we are monitoring the glaciers, seismology, seismic activity. We're also monitoring landslides, change of climate, etc. And another area is distance learning, e-learning, telemedicine, e-culture, e-library, data storage, grid, e-bureau, IPv6. Вы видите, что уже начали здесь, мы уже включаем IPv6. This is an example, and this is a picture of the Central Asian of the applied studies, and it was installed in Ilchek Glacier. We have the antenna, and we have partners in Germany, in Potsdam, and through CAREN channel we have exchange of data between Bishkek and Germany, as well as Central Asian partners from Central Asian countries. So this is again an example of glaciers. We have issued a case study on glaciers, and thanks to this network we can monitor and we can see what happens with our glaciers, because this laboratory is part of the Global Change Observatory. This is a good example, a good case of international collaboration. Now CAREN has signed, last year, it happened last year, we signed an agreement with TAEN network. This is the Asian Pacific, which includes 19 countries, and the office is based in Korea, and we have signed a cooperation agreement between these two networks, CAREN and TAEN. It includes Korea, China, the Philippines, etc. And this is a case of telemedicine, which is very critical now, and it is relevant now because the technologies enables us to have high-resolution images, which is very important for the health workers. Professor Shimizu, he set a goal to unify all the hospitals in Asia with the bandwidth connection, so that every hospital, if needed, can connect colleagues from Korea or Japan for advice or for training purposes. Next slide. This is also an example. In Asia, TAEN organized a session on telemedicine, and our doctors started participating in this telemedicine, and they can watch the surgery procedures with the use of laparoscopy. And this is the special video session which available for our health workers. And this year we have the cardiology center, and this was the first time they organized the Mir-Hemus readings, and where all Central Asian countries participated in this event. And professor from Moscow, it was broadcasted to Central Asian countries, including the Oblast Hospital in Karakol and Osh city of Kyrgyzstan. And again, we are establishing the system to prevent natural disaster. We install the seismological stations, and the users at schools and universities, we install this equipment, and in case of the seismology activity, these sensors will respond to it, and this is first of all be available for Bishkek and Almaty, which is, these two cities are prone to earthquakes. And this is the first, and the signal can come very quickly, and we should take prevention measures, like to turn off the gas system and electricity, etc. We are in process of implementing this system. This is a case study on the glacier in Ashgabat. This is a case of Turkmenistan. They made solar island. They have installed the solar panels. You know that Ashgabat climate is very hot, and they installed the web box, and all the data are recorded and transferred to their partners in Germany. They make analysis of efficiency and they try to figure out the most effective regime of operation of this panel. We have CAREN portal, which includes all the recent news and different materials and information which are available for the universities and research centers. EduRoam. So the benefits of education roaming. 95 countries have already signed off this agreement, and Kyrgyzstan. In Kyrgyzstan, we are implementing the EduRoam, and with the help of this tool, our teachers can travel to Europe and to other countries, and using their password and login, they can use the system. And finally, I would like to say that in the beginning of October, we had the first regional CAREN conference in Almaty. It was very successful because it was a very interesting conference with participation of both of the experts from Europe and local experts, and the conference was very successful. Next year we plan to hold the second CAREN regional conference in Bishkek, and we expect that it will be very interesting to attend, and I invite everybody. to participate in this conference. And finally, I would like to say that these research and education networks play a very important role in development and promotion of Internet or innovative Internet for the research and education, and they will play an important role in development of the country and building the knowledge society. Thank you very much. Спасибо, Аскар, большое. Мы обязательно приедем на эту конференцию, которую вы пригласили, и для того, чтобы подготовиться к этому, мы должны использовать видеоконференцию и CAREN, и мы можем организовать между Брюсселем и Бишкеком. И мы организовали эту видеосвязь, и очень хорошая была связь, поэтому мы хотим поблагодарить господина Азиса Абакиров. Будет сейчас делать презентацию председатель Кыргызской ассоциации разработчиков программного обеспечения и сервисов. Азис, пожалуйста.
Добрый день, уважаемые друзья.
Good morning, dear. My name is Aziz Abakirov, and I'm representing the Kyrgyz Association of Software and Service Developer Associations. And I'm very glad to participate in this symposium, in the outstanding event, because we haven't such event for a long time. We've been looking forward for this event, and we have very excellent experts here, and I all great, and thanks to the National Institute of Strategic Studies that you focused our attention on this topic. I would like to say and to tell you that what we did for the last 6 or 7 years, our organization, our association, was established in 2008. We brought together the companies developing the services. These are the companies that worked and they developed the software for international market. And our ambitions told us that we need propose to the government and to the society to propose new ways of economic development based on knowledge. And we mentioned several times about this, and based on innovation, on the creativity, based on creativity. On the capacity of human resources. Why? And therefore we developed our mission. Many people say that you do not have oil or gas, you are a landlocked country. Yes, it's true, we do not have oil and gas, but we have very talented persons. We have rich nature, full of energy, and it feeds us, and it provides us high spirits. Yes, we are a landlocked country, but internet has become our sea, and we have oceans of opportunities presented by internet, and therefore we will be able to create in Kyrgyzstan a very powerful industry of software development in order to access the global market and to develop local economy. We will facilitate reduction of the digital gap between city and countryside. We will involve big number of young people into our industry, and we will make our industry attractable with the best tax incentives, and these young people has become key of the future creative class. class of group of free and happy people. So this is already half of my presentation. And we have slogan, live in Kyrgyzstan, work for the world, for the whole world. In 2008, in cooperation with a number of experts, we were discussing the problems about the ways to overcome, about digital inequality issues, about trends. We have discussed all the things. In particular, many of the experts in IT, they continue working in IT sector. Mr. Niyazov, Viktor Albrecht, they continue working in development of IT. And we came to the conclusion that we have to develop the high technology park. This is the area for developers of services. To provide not only for preferential, but we also talked about creating the area or the field where the software developers could freely and openly function and operate. In cooperation with the Ministry of Transport and Communication, we have started developing this idea, promoting this idea. It happened in 2008, in 2009 there was revolution, and the Deputy Minister Nurlan Baymanov and the outstanding head of the department, Aida Alchieva, and this fragile woman has taken the responsibility for all this job. We have started to recover the project, and the government trusted us, and there was some elements of skepticism because young people probably, with the help of the Minister of Transport and Communication, we managed to promote this project in the Parliament, and the President signed this project and approved this project. We have managed to get best preferences for our programmers and developers. These are developers of internet services, business process outsourcing, call centers. There are a number of companies which we can involve. We involve all the services which can be provided through internet. And the taxes, 5% of the income tax. The formula is 5, 12 plus 1. So 12 consists of 10 for the social contribution to pension from the average wage of the country. Today we have, according to the state tax inspector, 13,400 sons, the average salary. And out of this amount, we pay 12%, and 1% is from the working capital to the development of high-tech park. If we take $1,000 as a wage, 5% of this amount of income tax, it makes 50, and 12 is 30. 12% of this is 30%. If we pay $10,000, that means that the income tax will become 50, and again 30, and 5,000 will be the income tax. So this is a simple mathematical calculation. So why we did this? Because when we develop the software, an important role is played by people, by human being, because the human resources is our assets, and they calculate salaries and compare wages in other, and they consider human resources as not as an asset, but in our company we consider them as an asset, a valuable asset. And since we do not have big resources, and this project of the Park of High Technologies was from bottom up. In other countries it is coming from the up to the bottom, but here it happened vice versa, from the bottom up. thanks to the developers and thanks to the good relations with the Ministry of Transport and Communication. And with limited resources, this high-tech park has become virtual. At the same time, we see that communication and internet is developing further. Now we have cloud technologies, which was beneficial for our country, and the whole country has become the high-tech technology country. We can see it in Bishkek, in Karakol, in Batken, and use the exterritorial regime. Helped us to make the country as an area of high technology. The goal for the high-tech park for 2030. So people say this project, they smile. In 2030, by 2030, we expect to have 50,000 people of employees, and the turnover will be to $4 billion. And now the current IT centers will become the centers of development of software in the cities, covering the whole country and covering the main countries, the cities of the country, including Bishkek. So the results achieved by 2014. We cannot say that it is exponential growth, but for the first and second quarter we achieved and we brought together 50 people for $500,000, which was generated by 50 countries, and geography covers Russia, Kazakhstan, and you will not be even African countries, India. So we have developed some software for Indian parties. And now we are in the third quarter of the year. In this park we have 110 employees employed in this park. And we have 26.2 million sum, more than the first two quarters in total. What we want to do, what our next challenges. So this park has started working stably, and but at the end of the year we're expecting to achieve good results. And in our next year performance, we will try to promote this park, and we have other goals and objectives. The first, since the park has started to penetrate to other countries, we need internet. We need, even now we feel high demand in new talented human resources. We should go to the region. We should try to convince people to go to our profession. And we have big call centers, big companies which require human resources. We will work on this. But what we need as a priority is the project. We want to do this in cooperation with the communication operator, telephone. Two companies, that's good. We can start with two companies. Kyrgyz Telecom is with us, and we have developed with Mr. The charter on international penetration of the whole country. We will go to the regions, and we should be responsible for access to internet. I will distribute this charter to everybody if you're interested. And second goal is IT in the regions, including education centers, companies, and open data. This is which is promoted by the government. We as developers of software, we can also work in this area. These are three initiatives which following after the high-tech park. We would like to do these three projects together with you. Thank you. Спасибо, Азис, за вашу такую интересную презентацию, за ваш вклад. И у нас есть представитель Google, Maksat Musaev, он специалист по поддержке клиентов среднего и малого бизнеса. Google. Maksat, слово вам, пожалуйста. We have made our presentation in Google Doc. So very positive statements were made by the first speaker, and 4 billion. I have seen 4 billion. I was even started thinking of changing my profession, changing my job. We will talk about this with Azis. So, to live in Kyrgyzstan and to work for the whole world, this is a topic, is my topic, and because it is very critical to live in my country, to communicate with my friends and to be with my friends here in country, but to work for the whole world. And I hope that your idea will come true. My name is Musaev Maksat. I came from Poland. I'm based in Wroclaw office in Poland. I will talk about the role of internet in business. 3 hours ago, under the 1 hour of coding, I made presentation in one of the capital school, and I remembered myself when I was a schoolboy. Even studying in one of the best equipped license in the country, the access of internet was only 2 hours a week. And we have made a big progress if we compare the figures. If we look at the figures for Kyrgyzstan, according to the World Internet Stats, in 2000 we have more than 50,000 users in Kyrgyzstan, and for 14 years we have already 2 million, more than penetration is 30.2%. The level of this level in developed reaches 50% and higher. Although we have high capacity of internet technologies in Kyrgyzstan, we have a room for effective work, and we want to show all the significance and the role of internet in development of the country and development of different businesses. And so, therefore, if we take one of the research workers of Mr. Savers, this is a study made in USA. It was interesting. He compared electrification of US with development of internet technologies. As you noticed in this graph, there is positive correlation between internet development of internet technologies and the efficiency of labor. That means certain individuals or businesses can also increase efficiency. They can reduce their cost and increase efficiency of their performance. Some interesting facts, so that keep your interest to my presentation. According to the internet.org, if developing countries had the same internet access as developed countries, so these countries could increase by 20-25%. Which means that 100 million people in the world could overcome poverty. These are very significant figures, which means that the role of internet is very high in development of the world. So internet was developing step by step. Now we have the mobile technologies, which and hits, development of hits, and every year we receive different hits. By 2018, according to one of the studies, demonstrated that the exchange of data in smartphones will increase by 14 times. We can see that whether we will use this capacity for our purposes or we can miss it. Mostly there is very difficult calculations how to calculate the economy of the country and the share of internet. And the studies which was most popular stated is McKinsey of company and BCG. If we look at McKinsey and company studies and the results, they have considered the 8 great countries, and in addition they have taken 5 additional countries: China, India, South Korea, Sweden, and I forgot one more country. And they demonstrated that currently this study was undertaken in 2012, and the share made 3.5%. If we take a Comtor operating company with the biggest company, its share is up to the share of this company reaches 11% in the GDP of the country. So in the developed countries, the internet plays an important role, and there were some threats or worries about efficiency and that people will start losing their job due to development of internet. But the results of McKinsey company demonstrated other results, and we have received vice versa. The number of jobs was increased through development of internet in the developed countries, and the performance of the small and medium businesses makes 10%. BCG group
was in G20. I think you can see it better. They made research and projection that by 2016 it will be $4.2 trillion. Let us come back to the past and compare what we had and where we go. If we look at the bank transactions, it was about 52 cents. Now, by internet, it's 1 cent as of 1999. Air tickets, $8 through the agencies. Now, in 1999, it's $1 online. And we can see the impact of internet, to what extent it has changed our life. With internet we got new trends, and productivity is growing, competitiveness is growing, innovation role is being improved. It's very difficult without innovation to differentiate. And new sources of funding, no borders, we can do it through cross-funding. Importance of non-tangible assets, the role is being changed, and we get more important. And then network effect of the outcome. According to one of the studies, there are 5 areas. First, transformative effect, productivity, competition, innovations. New sources of costs. One of EU studies, you can look at it later. Currently, we have gadget content, popularity of the website. Currently, the interesting content is valuable. Users let us come to the most important thing. SME in Kyrgyzstan is 40%, which is important room for development, and currently Kyrgyzstan, small and medium-sized business can get feedback from the client, which was spoken in Moscow by business consulting group, and targeted markets, simplification of personal selection, access to new markets. So it's an easy question. If we make it more practical, what internet can offer to SME. If we take the easiest tools which are provided free of charge online, if you have capacity for export, you can promote your data, your goods all over the world. You don't have any borders. Google Apps for Business, this is a well-known platform which gives a good outcome. At this positive note, I should finalize my speech. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to show the beauty of internet, but I hope that we will meet once again. Спасибо, Maksat, за то, что вы так четко все сказали. А теперь я бы хотел предупредить аудиторию. У нас сейчас будет заключительная речь. После этого у нас будет 15 минут на вопросы и обсуждения. Поэтому, пожалуйста, начинайте обдумывать вопросы. Вы тут были такие прилежные. И хочу дать вам возможность пообщаться с нашим президиумом. После заключительной речи до этого я хочу представить Улукмана Mamytova, который расскажет о перспективе гражданского общества в отношении электронного управления правительства. Good day once again. My name is Ulukman Mamytov. I will be talking about e-governance, although it's a continuation of talent when we need to build information society, knowledge-based society. When we hear such projects which takes us to the ocean supported by CAREN, when we have important objective, there is a feeling that people for whom we do that, our society, they are a bit late. There is a connectivity and the country become information network, but we need to make a situation when civil society can use it actively. So I will be talking about the role of civil society in development of e-government, and I would also call it who needs it. Who is the beneficiary? Since we talk about e-government, the average Kyrgyz citizen associates e-government that it is done for public organizations, so let them communicate, but this government, who is the beneficiary for this government? And let us be idealistic. We need this government for the benefit of our country, that people civil society and business should have proper environment. I believe that is the meaning of e-government. Why beneficiary is not motivated. In our country the activity is not very high. By the way, we have very good saying. It means that if people do not ask, do not demand, what can we expect from the government? And here I would like to recall the words of academician Zhibagladov, who was talking about maturity. When the society will become mature, probably there is no need to be ahead, or shall we wait? Why the government itself should be interested? First of all, simplification of all these procedures for e-government should push the development of business, because very often not value but complexity of procedures is an obstacle for SMEs. For example, 2/3 of our people, they live in rural areas, and they believe that after acceding to customs union everything would become good, but the farmers do not use IT, therefore we do not know whether it's going to be a benefit or not. And we need to stimulate information society development, because our main wealth is our people. And technology is a arranged network, but people do not catch up. So the train runs before people, but we need to be focused on citizens. And when we talk about e-government, before informatization, first we need to reform, to do administrative reform. Otherwise, we will inform the order which exists now. And all people heard that a couple of years ago that the news that once we've informatized our city, but when I violated traffic rules, no one gives me penalty. What is the problem? Because it was not thought over. So the technology was ahead of thinking how it should work, where the business processes should go. It's very deep subjects, but we do not have much time to discuss them deeply. All collection of biometric personal data. About 20% of people were covered, but I watched the process, and Niyaza Fermek wrote in Facebook that the entire staff of Kyrgyz Telecom, they had their biometric data collected. But ideally, people should do it voluntarily. And Azis expert will support me, and Mr. Kutanov, who was an ambassador in Japan. In Japan, there is an interesting institute, Koseki. Probably you heard, you know that Japan is a high technological country. Do they do not do it without thinking, and they still keep conservative approach. There are some things which are very easy to obtain electronically, and there are some things which are very difficult to obtain, let's say ID, initial ID. And in order to obtain ID, several generations of a family should be reflected in a single database, and before obtaining passport, they check the data. And you remember in Chechnya there were some terrorists with Kyrgyz passports, Kyrgyz IDs, so it means that it was easily to obtain it. But biometric data makes it easier, and we love our traditions. And can you imagine that our people would be very good, and we need to learn how Japanese can use traditions in 21st century. And practical example. 6 months ago, the state tax service supported by USAID reform, thanks them, they made a very interesting tool for people and businesses, how to simplify, facilitate governmental services. So this is a web application which is a link for getting e-services, and this interim link allows to fill out single tax declaration easily. Please raise hands of those who used it, or just Azis. So 90%, even more, have not heard even about that. But there are projects like that, and one of the examples, it allows please, those who are interested, calculator.declaration.kt. It allows you to easily fill out the declaration with some hints how to fill it out. So this is an electronic service in classical form. And it's cheap. It's fast. Only 3 people developed this product. And what are the conclusions? People do not use this calculator for different reasons. They do not know, they haven't heard, they are scared. But accountants, professional accountants, they use this calculator. Tatiana Kim, the chair of PMK, says, myself and my son used this calculator exclusively comfortable. We had workshops in 8 towns for tax authorities. All people are happy. But yesterday evening I got the data for December 2014, how it is used. Only 4.5% physical persons, 11% individual entrepreneurs, and 85% are legal entities with accountants. And I am sure this 4.5% are tax officers or accountants. So we make some projects, but people do not use them, and that is the challenge. Accurate data, if you want, 4,413 physical persons, 261 physical persons, and 4,413 legal persons, and very, very few individuals. And the way I would like to make 2 suggestions. The first, the government, I believe in a person of talent, and Strategic Studies Institute should develop understanding of information society and to make a map. We do not need to wait 10 years. We need to help the society to be mature. And secondly, second suggestion is to the business, which is our driver. They should not wait and they should actively form the business or the business governmental contracts. Business associations can do that. At this, allow me to finish, and I hope that jointly we will build the information society.
Thank you very much.
Вам спасибо большое, очень интересно. И в завершение у нас прекрасные презентации сегодня были. Я хотел бы вопрос из зала. Вы тут слушали терпеливо. Все презентации у нас есть микрофон. И если у вас есть вопрос, пожалуйста, поднимайте руку. И можете всему президиуму задавать вопросы или его отдельным членам, как вы хотите. Есть вопросы?
Здравствуйте,
Азис Султанаев, entrepreneur. I have a question to the Association of our software developers. And I look for the information. How many software developers we have, how many IT companies, do you have any statistics about the number of IT graduates a year? In 2009, our association carried out marketing studies. Since then, and it was about 500 software developers. And there were many more that are involved in internet. And 500 developers, 30 teams, and we didn't call them companies back then. They were teams that worked in shadow. We didn't see them. And can you imagine, according to our estimations, in 1999, these 500 developers made up to $10 million from abroad. This is the very recent numbers of 2009, and in 2015 or 16 we will do similar marketing study, and the high technology park not just gives an opportunity to work honestly and to pay taxes, but the format has changed, format of taxation, and we can pay taxes openly, legalize our funds, shadow funds. No, the funds that we gain honestly. And I believe that the high technology park will give the number. As to the universities in 2009, annually there were about 2,000 graduates by 4 universities. As to the current numbers, we do not know yet, but I believe that we will do this study. Спасибо большое, Азис. У нас тут проблемы с переводом. Не очень хорошо, что идет, но я думаю, что Азис все хорошо ответил. А есть ли у вас какие-то вопросы в аудитории? Ну тогда, может быть, если вы думаете о своих вопросах, я хотела бы отразить вопрос, который уже Азис поднимал, что аспект человеческих ресурсов, знания важны, и знания по ИКТ. И мы не говорим о базовых компьютерных навыках, а говорим о тем, кто строит сети, их обслуживает и работает в технической среде, и И вопрос педагогам из университетов и из КАРЕН. Как вы рассматриваете текущую ситуацию в этом отношении, в техническом направлении в Кыргызстане, и какие действия вы бы рекомендовали для заинтересованных лиц, чтобы поднять уровень и количество людей и студентов в поддержку экономического роста для вашей страны? Андрю, давайте вы. Да, конечно. Наш университет, там есть проблема в том, что мы на английском преподаем. Поэтому для нас недостаточно, чтобы люди, местные выпускники школ, знали математику и технические аспекты, но они еще должны знать английский. В этом смысле проблем много. И в этом году мы создаем специальные английские классы для местных школ, чтобы люди уже даже математику на английском изучали. Ну а в целом, я думаю, все знают, это не секрет, что самая большая в стране, это то, что школьная система государственных школ, она обрушилась. И это самая большая долгосрочная проблема, с которой сталкивается страна. И есть эту проблему может решить только государство. Я не думаю, что кто-то извне может проконсультировать это. Это слишком большая проблема. Если эта проблема не будет решена, то вы всегда будете сталкиваться с такой проблемой, что у вас будет достаточно талантов, но не будет достаточно квалифицированных людей. И тогда возникает вопрос, а что делать, чтобы это улучшить? Мы платим за программы с тем, чтобы еще дополнительно подготовить детей из бедных семей. Но мы только несколько человек можем взять, это много стоит денег. И получается здесь 5 миллионов человек, 7 это совсем немного. И вопрос тогда такой, как можно сделать так, чтобы не потерять тех талантливых людей, которые здесь есть, и убедить больше людей, которые что они должны заходить в это направление, вот чем занимается Азис и его группа, с тем, чтобы у них была база. И, к сожалению, мы видим, что все меньше и меньше людей обладают такой базой с годами, и это самая серьезная проблема. И я думаю, здесь есть, кроме нас, еще несколько университетов, которые могут квалифицированных айтишников выпускать, но я не знаю, проблема есть какая-то на уровне университета или нет. Я думаю, что просто недостаточно студентов, которые хотят становиться специалистами КТ. Аскар, у вас есть еще комментарий? Да. Мы тоже большое внимание уделяем развитию человеческих ресурсов, регулярно организуем тренинги, но обычно мы концентрируемся не только на администраторах системы высшего образования, но иногда по некоторым приложениям мы это делаем, и в рамках нашей деятельности мы поддерживаем университеты по развитию потенциала, особенно инженеров ИКТ, но Алмаз Бакенов, его нет, правда, здесь. Он, может быть, более подробно после обеда может рассказать об этом, потому что их миссия заключается также в том, чтобы повысить уровень выпускников университетов, факультетов ИКТ, инженеров ИКТ, чтобы они стали более профессиональными. Спасибо, Аскар. Я думаю, это очень важный вопрос, и мне очень нравится то утверждение, которое вы сделаете, что вы можете быть в Кыргызстане, а работать на любую страну, то есть работать глобально, жить в Кыргызстане. Я думаю, что самое важное здесь это, как только вы начинаете с школьной системы, если она будет сильная, которая могла будет выпускать людей с навыками когнитивного мышления, аналитического техническими навыками, соответствующими социальными навыками. Это первый шаг. Тогда вы дойдете туда, где вузы смогут играть такую роль, чтобы прививать технические навыки. И технические навыки и уже позднее можно как-то налаживать 18-19-летними детьми. Но вот в Кыргызстане государственная система образования там мало принимают, и система не очень устойчива в будущем. Поэтому совершенно очевидно важный вопрос и критическая часть будущего этой страны заключается в том, чтобы система образовательная оставалась прочной. Если мы хотим разрабатывать, обучать такую рабочую силу, которая будет конкурировать на глобальном уровне и работать не только в Кыргызстане, и хоть где угодно, их надо этому обучать, языковым навыкам, социальным навыкам. Вот это являются основными кирпичиками для того, чтобы создавать будущих рабочих для такого рода работы. It's very important theme. Could you please put my presentation on the screen? I was expecting such a question. The matter is that our association tries to work with all actors involved in IT education, including AUCA, and we got outstanding people, graduates from that American university. They are innovative people, and some other universities like Polytechnical and Slavonic universities, and we found a very good niche, which are colleges, lyceums, which has European certification ICTL. But the world is developing so fast that all these things get out of date, and every year we have new things. Everything is growing, doubling. And we understand, when we were school children and university students, we understand that it is out of date, and the world is not based now on memorizing, on learning of data, like in Soviet schools, that we were forced to learn dates. But now it's enough to teach children how to search information and how to use it. That should be our goal. And from the point of view, there are three waves on Daniel Bell. Steam power, the second wave is electricity, and electronics, the third wave, e-government, e-society, and so on. And we expect the fourth wave, which would be internet. Next slide, please. And everything related to electronics will go to internet, and our expectations would be justified when Steve Jobs made internet a platform. And mobile phone currently is more powerful than the entire army after the Second World War. And many scholars are doing nanotechnologies, biotechnologies, and internet gets expanded, social media, TV goes to internet, IPTV, networks, telephony, and 15 years ago we thought that internet was nothing but communication, but it gets expanded. And I would like to focus on this. We have a mountain in the south, and this is a celestial horse. In 104 before Christ, Chinese Emperor Wu Di, it was a country in Central Asia, Davan, and they had such horses, and their sweat was blood, and these celestial horses, they could have taken you far away to the sky rise of immortality. But he lost several times, and then several dozens of horses were donated to him. And Kyrgyz people have a saying, which means a horse is a wing of Kyrgyz people. So we need to channel our education towards internet and use horses and attributes our ancestors introduced east to the west due to the Silk Road. It was not conquer, it was multicultural exchange due to our nomadic ancestors. Next slide, please. Internet should be wings of Kyrgyz people, and we should channel our young people towards that. They need to learn internet technologies, new technique, and to make some attributes, and to connect East and West, live in Kyrgyzstan, to work globally. That's where we should channel our young people.
I think that was a great finishing statement for this session. Other questions from the audience? Anybody has an urgent question? Not at this stage. I think people are already hungry.